Hello and welcome back to the Working with Raster Data in ArcPy module lecture series. In this section, we are going to look at how to use the online help to understand the raster tool environment settings and licensing needed for each tool. You've already, and throughout this course, had a lot of practice at using the help documentation for your ArcPy tools and for your Python tools for that matter. Help documentation is your key for when it comes to ArcPy to the syntax, use descriptions, understanding what is needed by sometimes cryptic parameter names, and for code samples that are often really important when it comes to getting started when using tools that perhaps you've never used before. In this section, we're going to take a look at how you can further use the help documentation to understand even more about the raster tools in the ArcPy installation. So first, you might ask, how do I find the help documentation? Well, you can always bookmark this URL that I have on the screen here. It's also in some of your course documents. It will take you to the latest version of ArcPro Help. Or you can do what I most often do, which is simply go to Google and type in the tool name in ArcPro, and it will take you to a list of things, and eventually you will find the exact one you're doing. So that's exactly what we're going to do right now. We are going to go here and we are going to take a look at the help documentation for the latest version of ArcPro. Why is it important that you're looking at the latest version of ArcPro? Well, all of the Esri products have multiple iterations. When it comes to your current installation, you actually want to make sure that you're matching the help documentation that you're referencing with the version of ArcPro that's installed either on your computer or for your organization. That is easily found by opening up ArcPro and going to the options, the file options there, and on that screen it will tell you the version of ArcPro that you have. So on my computer and at Miami right now, we are running ArcPro 2.7. So if you're watching this in the future perhaps, and we're at ArcPro 2.8 or 3.0, just know that this URL that goes to the latest, it's going to take you to the reference for the version that is the latest. If you are interested in the help documentation for previous versions of the software, you can always look here, and ArcMap has the same thing. When you land on the ArcMap help, it will let you toggle between specific versions of the software. All right, so once we're here, this is just the main page for ArcGIS Pro. I recommend using this search bar right here, not the main search bar. This search up here is going to search all of Esri, which is usually very unhelpful if you already have the software. The main searches off of Esri are primarily consumer facing, so new customer facing. So it's a lot of descriptive information about what Esri products can do and not the details of how to do it, which is exactly what you want right here. You want to know how to do something. So if you come down here into this search toolbar, this is going to search the ArcGIS Pro tool portion of their online resources. So let's just go, and we've talked about the tool Extract by Mask. I'm just going to search for that tool. All right, so what I want you to see is that there's several things that come up here. So I can see that it's talking about the extraction tool set, extraction geoprocessing functions, extraction by attribute. I know the name of my tool is Extract by Mask, and if I want to go into ArcPro, I could verify that it is stored in the Spatial Analyst toolbox. If I'm working with raster data, I typically know that the tools I'm looking for are going to be found in the Spatial Analyst toolbox, and that's what this parentheses here is telling me. Extract by Mask found within the Spatial Analyst toolbox. So this happens, the first record here happens to be the tool I'm interested in, or I think, so I'm going to click on it and see. And indeed, yes, Extract by Mask is, based upon looking at the illustration, is the tool that I'm interested in. So the top part of help here, you guys are already very familiar with. It gives you the summary of the tool, often a visual illustration, talks through the usage, how should the tool be used and in what situations. For ArcPy, right, this is one of the most important pieces, is looking to find the syntax of that tool and then all of the description of these parameters, because oftentimes the names of the parameters might not be real intuitive, so you want to come over here and you want to look at the explanation, and you also want to look at the data type that either it's expecting to see or that it will send out to you if it's something that's to get saved to disk. Notice that Extract by Mask, again, it's a raster tool. It does not have anything in the parameters about saving anything out. So remember, this tool is going to return something. And if you come down here, the returned value, notice it says an out raster, and it says the output raster containing the cell values extracted from the input raster, and the data type is a raster. In our methodology of using the save method on the returned object is our way to save this out raster object into a permanent data set. Once again, we have wonderful code samples in all of this help documentation, so these are often sometimes really helpful in being able to discern and decipher how tools should be used if you've never used them before. And sometimes they even have a longer script that goes through more of an analysis with multiple steps that just simply include the tool that you're on, so that gives you a little broader context for how the tool can be used. All right, the new thing that we're going to learn about here by investigating help is at the bottom, and it's the environments and it's the licensing information. So the environments, this is a list of all of the Esri ArcGIS environments that this tool pays attention to. If you have set any of these environments within your environment settings in the desktops area, or if you're in your ArcPy script and you explicitly set them, these are the ones that this particular tool will pay attention to. It does not mean that you have to have all of these set. Likely you will never have all of them set. But it's telling you that if you do have an extent set, it's going to pay attention to that. If you have a current workspace set, it's going to pay attention to that and save the output into the current workspace. If you have a snap raster set, it's going to pay attention to that and ensure that your output, your raster object that gets output, adheres to that snap raster and that cell alignment. So this is just a good place to come and check to see if the tool pays attention to the environment settings that you have set up in your script. The other thing down here is the licensing information. This is going to be where you can see whether or not you have access to the tools. Not necessarily whether you do, but knowing your licensing, whether or not the licensing that you know you have is listed here. So basic, standard, and advanced. These are 3 different tiers of the base ArcGIS licensing that a person or an organization can get. You can Google and look in the Esri documentation about what you get with each of these. It tends to change quite a bit over time about what's available in each of those 3 different tiers. Essentially what it kind of boils down to is what you're allowed to do and the number of tools you have access to within each of these. So that's one tiering of the software. The next tiering is whether or not you have the extensions available to you. Have you purchased these separate extensions like spatial analyst, image analyst, network analyst, geostatistical analyst, all these additional big toolboxes that you have available to you. So what it's telling you here is that if you have the basic installation of ArcGIS, you can use this tool as long as you have the spatial analyst extension. Same with standard and same with advanced. You can use this tool as long as you have the spatial analyst extension. Okay, the next tool that I want us to look at is we're going to look at one that's called Mosaic to New Raster. And I want us to look at some of the differences in what's reported with Mosaic to New Raster. So when I search for that tool, I find that Mosaic to New Raster. That's the name of the tool. It pops up first. I can see that it lives in the data management toolbox. So let's go see if this is the tool that I'm intending. It merges multiple raster data sets into a new raster data set. That's the tool I'm looking for. Notice that this one lives in the data management toolbox, meaning that's usually your first clue that this particular tool is going to require less licensing. So it's not going to require the spatial analyst extension because the tool doesn't live in the spatial analyst toolbox. All of our typical things with our usage and our syntax and our description of our syntax, moving through here, through the code samples, down here to our environments and our licensing information. So this one is going to be different than our extract by mask. The first thing you're going to notice is it's going to seem like you're going to feel like this is shorter, and it is. This Mosaic to New Raster tool pays attention to fewer environment settings than most of the typical tools that are in the spatial analyst toolbox. The biggest one that I want you to notice that is missing from this list here is the mask is not listed here. So this particular tool, Mosaic to New Raster, will not pay attention to your mask environment setting. Notice workspace is also not listed here. So it's not going to pay attention to your automatic workspace setting. You would have to explicitly tell it where on disk to save. Also, I want you to pay attention here and think through the licensing. So the licensing here, notice that it says for basic, standard, and advanced, it's available. So it doesn't have to list out the spatial analyst extension because it's living in the data management toolbox, which is a toolbox that is just available at any licensing level with the base installation of ArcGIS. So that's two really nice looks at two different tools, one that's in the spatial analyst toolbox, one that's just in the data management toolbox, and also they are paying attention to different environment settings. So before you go use any tool in the desktop environment and also in ArcPy, it's always a good idea to understand what environment settings the tools are going to pay attention to, so you know to plan for that as you're using the tool and as you're setting up your analysis workflow. All right, so that summarizes, and that is the end of our look at the help documentation. I hope you go out and look at it on your own, and in the activities that follow, you will be, there will be places where it's indicated that you need to go out to the help documentation and look at these types of things and report back what it is that you have found.